And we are on. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this edition of Burnin Rubber, the socially distanced edition. Uh, we are broadcasting through our Zoom meeting. This will go out on Anchor.fm as well as YouTube and as well as Spotify. My name is Sterling Siemens. I'm joined tonight by my co-hosts Hal Estep down below in the red Chiefs cap. Say hi, Hal.
Hello, I got my prediction right.
And to my right, based on my screen, is Justin Palmer. Justin, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. Let's get this on the road.
Fantastic. There was quite a bit that happened drama-wise. I'd say drama is the big thing that is a constant with motorsports, it seems, as we look at the racing last weekend. There was the NASCAR race at Bristol, the virtual Bristol Motor Speedway. Real racing still isn't back yet, unfortunately, and it probably won't be for a while, but we'll discuss that later in the show. But William Byron won the Bristol virtual race for NASCAR, the Food City Showdown, part of iRacing. It was a wreck fest. 150 laps virtually at Bristol Motor Speedway. Byron led 116 laps, but 12 cautions for 66 laps. That's nearly half the race. In a way, though, it was kind of like a typical Bristol race. Wouldn't you think, Justin?
I think it was a bit of Bristol, and then you added a mixture of Talladega and Daytona. It got to the point where they had to say single file restarts only. Hey, that's the first time in a NASCAR sanctioned race we've had single file restarts since, I believe, 2007, 2008?
2009, the first 13 races, they had single file before they moved to double file shootout style.
Still, that is something I haven't seen in a long time. And to see that at Bristol, that was weird. And I thoroughly enjoyed just how much of a crap show it was. Obviously the best driver won. Byron was not going to be beat. He led the most laps. He probably could have led all the laps if he wanted to, but it was just an absolute mess, and it was fun to watch.
How were you able to watch the race at virtual Bristol, or what was your takeaway from it, if there were any takeaways?
I watched a good bit of it, and then I just kind of sat there going, I'm watching virtual caution fest. What have I done? It became tedious just going, all right, there's 3 laps, there's 4, there's another one. Okay, Clint Boyer just wrecked another person. Cool. Clint, what are you doing out there, buddy? And it was entertaining, I'll give him that, but I just couldn't keep watching it.
It was entertaining. I'll give him that much. It definitely was entertaining. And props to Clint Boyer for making it entertaining somewhat. Well, not somewhat. He was the entertainment, and he is the entertainment during the Fox Sports broadcasts. Clint Boyer is easily one of the funniest characters in NASCAR as a whole right now.
My favorite part of those races is whenever Larry Mack just decides to roast Clint Boyer out of nowhere. It's so sudden, and you're kind of like, Larry, all right.
One of the best calls, Clint Boyer calls I've ever heard has come from Larry Mack. And we got one call on this roof coming across the start-finish line.
It's Clint Boyer. Yeah, the 2007 Daytona 500. Iconic
what an introduction.
From all three of them, Mike Joy, Larry McReynolds, and Darrell Waltrip. But Clint Boyer, as usual, one of the funniest guys out there. There was some drama that involved Clint Boyer and another driver. That will be one of our big segments later on. But I also want to talk about the IndyCar virtual race from virtual Barber Motorsports Park, the Honda Indy Grand Prix of Alabama. Sage Karam, the last week's winner from Watkins Glen, started on the pole again for this race, and he led 24 laps early, but then he crashed at lap 30, or at least he crashed at lap 30, finished 27th, and in the end, it was Scott McLaughlin, a guy who's not even a regular IndyCar driver, driving for Team Penske. He led the final 6 laps of the race and went on to beat his teammate Will Power, as well as the highest finishing Andretti driver Scott Speed. So 2 non-regulars for IndyCar finishing on the podium for this event. But we've talked about Scott McLaughlin on the show and how dominant he is in V8 Supercar championship competition. He won 18 races last year, and there's a lot of hype around what he can do in IndyCar, and to see him in these races do so well, it's got to be a good sign of what could happen if he's behind the wheel of an actual car. Wouldn't you think, Hal?
Ooh, I want to say yes because I am on the Scott McLaughlin hype train, but this is iRacing and I just can't do it. I just can't go, well, he's doing great in this. That means he's going to be doing great in the real thing. I can't do it yet, purely because I just looked at the box score. Jimmy Johnson finished 12th, and I can't tell if he would do better or worse in an IndyCar. I'm actually not sure. Because he's shown that he cannot drive an iRacing until this race, apparently. So I don't know. He's still one where I'm sold on him personally because of his past with the 18 wins. iRacing, kind of in terms of your argument, it doesn't feel relevant to how he'd do in an actual IndyCar to me.
I can kind of see the argument because, right now, 2 out of 3 winners of the on the NASCAR side have been guys who have never won a cup race ever. William Byron, we all know he's eventually going to get one, and barring unforeseen circumstances that would, for some reason, take it, like he decides to retire out of nowhere. But Byron's going to get a win, but Timmy Hill was kind of out of nowhere. So on one hand, you do have to take these races with a grain of salt when it comes to comparing in talent. It is iRacing. Some guys have been on the circuit for a lot longer than others. I'm pretty sure McLaughlin has been on the iRacing circuit for a little longer than a lot of these IndyCar guys is over the winter, or because I think he was getting ready for that IndyCar debut. But it's just a great teaser for what he can do if we can go back racing this season, or if we have to delay until 2021 and when we get to see him drive for Penske.
Yeah, the hype is definitely real for McLaughlin. In off-season testing at Circuit of the Americas, he was 3rd fastest. If I remember correctly, the only 2 guys who were faster than him were Will Power and Alexander Rossi. That was it.
I think casual
guys like Hunter Ray, Simon Pagenaud, Scott Dixon, just some top names in IndyCar. He was beating them just on the laps at that track.
I think casual fans are going to be very surprised when this guy comes onto the circuit. I know a lot of people are not watching these races, but once this season and once we get back going, and you see Scott McLaughlin come out to the racetrack, some people are going to be like, who the heck is this guy? And to everybody who's watching these races will know who he is when we get back to racing. And it is going to be very interesting to see how good he's going to be. Because I think we can universally agree he's a good race car driver. But can he convert it to IndyCar? Can he convert it to the actual thing and wreak havoc on these guys?
It'll be fun to watch for sure. Another highlight I want to bring up from the IndyCar event, Robert Wickens, the driver for right now Arrow McLaren SP. For those who don't know his story, Robert Wickens was possibly the most talented IndyCar rookie in a very long time to get behind the wheel of a car. When he got to IndyCar in 2018, had several runner-up finishes, almost won on debut at St. Petersburg before Alexander Rossi cleaned him out on the last restart. But Wickens was on his way to having a great season before having a terrifying accident at the Pocono Raceway, where he was basically rendered a paraplegic as a result of that crash. Wickens has been working to get back behind the wheel of a race car. He's just watching his recovery has been astounding. I mean, he was able to stand and dance with his wife at their wedding. Just it's remarkable to see the progress that he has made. And this past weekend, he, in a sense, got behind the wheel of a race car, albeit virtually, but he started 29th in the field, and he finished in the top 10 in 8th. I mean, 29th, that was dead last when I look at the results. Dead last in the field, and he finishes in the top 10. It's incredible because it shows, and I know it's not the real thing, but Wickens still has the speed. He was one of the fastest rookies in a very long time when he entered the sport. It's still there. The speed is still there. I want to start with Justin. Just looking at the result that Wickens was able to make this weekend, is there a chance that you think that he gets behind the wheel of an actual car in the future? But also just reflecting on how big this is for Robert Wickens and for his fans and motorsports as a whole.
It's absolutely amazing that he's back in any capacity. I mean, it's been just an absolute joy to have him back at the racetrack like prior to this, but this was an absolute joy to see him and get running up through the field and finishing 8th. And I'm just like, and when I was watching that race, I just kept watching and him go higher and higher and higher, and that was just a big smile on my face because he's worked so hard to get back to this point and just to be even in racing with these guys. Yes, he's still not at full capacity. He's still not able to use his legs to pedal the car. But in a way, it almost felt like he was part of this group. He was racing with these guys, and he actually did race with these guys. It just felt right for him to be back. And the one thing I will say, drivers come and go, and sometimes they are taken out of the race car due to injury. But I've heard this time and time again, you never lose that driving instinct. You never lose that muscle memory. And once he got back into that race car, he wheeled the heck out of that car, or he avoided a lot of crashes. He avoided a good amount of trouble. I think he got caught up in one incident, but that's par for the course in all of these series so far. But just to see him in 8th was an absolute joy to watch, and I hope he can do good this week as well.
How, what's your take on Robert Wickens?
You know, I saw the story on Sports Center the night it happened, and all I could think about was one quote, just watching him wheeling it on iRacing, and that was "Fight for your dreams, and they'll fight for you." He could have easily, with the steering wheel situation, could have easily said, "I'll let the boys have at it. I'll sit back and watch them. One day I'll be back." No, he found a way. He found a steering wheel that was allowed him to race. And he got out there and he showed them, I'm going to get back in that car one of these days. When this is all over, I'm going to get back in the car, recover, and I'm going to race you guys the same way when I get back in the car. So I can't wait. I think he will be back in the car one day. I think it will happen.
I mean, it's important to be optimistic, especially in these times that we're living in now. But concerning Wickens, I would love, absolutely love, and I think I can barely talk now. I think all of us can say we would love to see him get back behind the wheel of a car. Will it happen? I don't know. Like, I don't know if it'll happen. I would love for it to happen, but realistically, I'm just not sure. And even if he doesn't, I just want to make sure that he can live his life without limitations. And he, like, day by day, the progress he's making, he's knocking out those limitations. Like, you can tell in his recovery and in his workouts that he puts out on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. His story reminds me a lot of Alex Zanardi, the two-time kart and champ car series champion, who lost both of his legs in an accident in Germany in 2001. But he didn't let it slow him down, because then while his kart career was basically done, he went on to win at least 3 gold medals for Italy in the Paralympics. In fact, I can look it up right now, what Alex Zanardi was able to do. But he hasn't let it slow him down. He even got back behind the wheel for, I believe it was the Rolex 24 at Daytona in
Drove with
2019.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It definitely shows the determination of drivers to get back in the race car and show that they love. I mean, they love to do what they do, and no matter the risks, they are always willing to get back into that race car. And you see it with so many guys, is where they could have called it quits, but they kept working to get back in that race car. And we've seen some amazing stories come out of it. I can almost guarantee you, I think we're going to see yet another amazing story come out of Robert Wickens. And I don't think his IndyCar career is over, or not one bit.
Yeah, it's just shades of Alex Zanardi. That's the best thing that I can pull out of the story of Robert Wickens, the legend of Robert Wickens. So it'll be fun to see how it unfolds in the future. Another series that's been happening, the Short Track Showdown that NASCAR and iRacing have been putting on, has been broadcasted on NBC Sports. They held a race at virtual Rockingham on Monday. I think, Justin, you might have more information on that than I do.
Yeah. It was a great race for a small field. Oh, definitely. Rockingham was alive as ever in the virtual world. And it was, I think, if I can recall correctly, I think it was William Byron who won that race on a bump and run and towards the end. So I'm either thinking of that or the finish to the race of the following day at IRP
Yeah.
with Denny wrecking at the line to finish the race. So I mean, in the short track shootout, as it were, NBC's done a pretty good job with that, and it's just more entertainment for us. And saying Chase Briscoe won last night's race, so that's as much as I know for sure. But it's been good and solid racing. I can't think of like the winners off the top of my head, but we've seen some good action in from the NBC crew, and all the drivers involved.
Yeah, I mean, to get involved with short tracks and to go to these other tracks, and I want to turn to Hal Leestep on this. How they went to Rockingham. Dale Earnhardt Jr. Basically took an iRacing simulator to North Wilkesboro. It'd be great to see these tracks that NASCAR hasn't been to in a long time, or just these tracks that have just fallen by the wayside and have basically become relics of time. It's fun to see NASCAR get back to them, albeit in a virtual way.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. In for now, this is for some of these tracks. This is the best you can get, really, because they're in no shape to race at. In even if this pandemic wasn't happening, they're just not in the shape required to race at. So this is as good as it's going to get for some of them. Now, in a way, it keeps them alive. It's a way to keep the spirit alive. And I'm sure people watching will probably go, well, why aren't they racing there now? And that'll get their attention going and say, well, maybe I could help out somehow to make it go back to the way it was when they could race there.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to see them go back to Rockingham, North Wilkesboro. In the back of my mind, the track that just comes to mind thinking, man, I wish they would try it is, and I know they're not going to because it's not even suitable for anyone to be out there right now, Nazareth Speedway, if only. But, I mean, I think, have they got, correct me if I'm wrong, but have they got Nashville Speedway USA on iRacing?
I don't know. I think that's one of the tracks that they either have or they're very close to scanning. I think they might be waiting to see how the whole Tennessee MLS, Nashville saga goes to see if they want to scan it now or wait until the potential renovations to that track comes. But as you say, North Wilkesboro is finally coming to the iRacing in the summer. That's going to keep that track at the very least based online and almost save that racetrack virtually. But I mean, again, I really wish they would bring back North Wilkesboro or save that track somehow. But you also have tracks like Rockingham and Lucas Oil Speedway, the one in Indianapolis that the Xfinity and the truck guys used to go to. Those are tracks that, I mean, this is great for them because it gets NASCAR's attention back onto those racetracks. Those tracks absolutely deserve dates. It's in either the Xfinity, the truck, maybe even the Cup for a couple of those tracks, especially Rockingham in particular. But these tracks that have kind of been thrown to the wayside are now getting a little bit of second life with this virtual racing. And I'm sure that's going to help them out in the long run as we move closer towards a 2021 schedule.
Yeah. One more race that I forgot to put in the agenda, but Formula One had a virtual Grand Prix this past weekend at virtual Albert Park for the Australian Grand Prix. In a gaming sense, Charles Leclerc from Ferrari won the event. It was a dominating performance. He fended off competition from Alexander Albon, George Russell, Nicholas Latifi, and Antonio Giovinazzi to claim the victory. Lando Norris was also set to take part, but his computer crashed just as the action was about to get underway. So Lando Norris, he was one of the most impressive rookies last year. I think if you look at the rookies from last year, both he and Albon were definitely the two best rookies from last year. And it's a shame that Norris was not able to take part in the event because he is an esports enthusiast. So he would have been able to probably give Leclerc for a run for his money. But that's the problem with technology sometimes. Connections just cut out.
Never fun when that happens. Never fun.
Yeah. Now going on to another topic that I want to bring up. Since iRacing has become basically the big thing that motorsports has been relying on for entertainment because there is no real motorsports happening because of the COVID-19 pandemic that's happening all around the world. Some series are starting to take it pretty seriously, like the NASCAR Euro Series. There was an article that was put out, and I'm going to try to find it right now. They announced that there was going to start being some serious consequences towards the virtual series. In an article here from Matt Weaver, I'm going to share the screen here real quick. So in this article from Matt Weaver of Auto Week, NASCAR Euro iRacing Series to pay points toward the real season. Yes, you heard that right. They're going to start putting points in for reality on a virtual series. It will partially be decided by what takes place on iRacing. They launched the series last week. The league will feature real-life teams and drivers on Tuesday nights with digital versions of the Cup Series car on a mixed schedule of European and American tracks. So, yeah, they're basically, they're charging real points for this stuff. Hal, I want to start with you. And I see both of you shaking your heads, and let me do the same because I don't like this. Hal, back me up here.
So first of all, if this is precedent for what's coming in the NASCAR main series of iRacing, that means Timmy Hill's in the playoffs, and I accept that as my reality personally. But for the rest of this,
he's gotta make it inside the top 30 first off.
Oh, well, if we keep going on iRacing, I don't think he's going to get thrown out. But what are we doing here? We're playing a game for the fun of it. This started out so nice. Everyone gathered on iRacing to have some fun, to get the fans involved, and have a good time. Now we're going to try and make this really matter. Oh, gosh, why? Why are we doing that when people were having such a good time? You take the fun out of things when you start throwing in real consequences.
Yeah. Justin?
I think this was the week, and I think you kind of knew it was coming. The honeymoon period expired. We had our 2 weeks where everybody thought is all sunshine and rainbows, and you had you had two things that happen. You had fans, and as they always do, and I think we're a part of it, complaining about the product, and you had NASCAR meddling in affairs that we did not want to see. And this just why? NASCAR Euro hasn't even started their series yet. And I guess if you're doing it for a full seat, depending on how long this goes, this might not be too terrible. Oh, and I say that lightly. However, if you get back going in like May, June, July, whenever you do, and you have half of your season left, that's when you will start running into issues. Is when the on-track product and the off-track product have almost equal impact, and that's where you start running into trouble. Even if it's 75% and for actual racing and 25%, that's a problem. So NASCAR Euro, you're not similar. You're similar to a lot of what the guys do here in North America, but you also have a lot of differences. I just hope this one stays across the pond.
Yeah, just thinking about this now, it's like this thought just happened in my head. Like, you know how Timmy Hill is really good at iRacing? That's not a secret. Like, let's say Timmy Hill was in the NASCAR Euro Series, and they did this for about a little over half the season. They did the iRacing, and it's for real. Timmy Hill does really good. And then, let's say, like halfway through the season, the pandemic slows down, and everyone's like, oh, now we can go back to actual racing. Timmy Hill's results in real racing in an actual car, his equipment is terrible. It's not going to be the same thing. Like, he may finish top 5, top 6 for the iRacing events, but if you put him in the real car, he's going to be in 30th. Unless it's Talladega or Daytona. But just virtual racing is not the same as real racing, and there are some people out there that need to stop acting like it is the same thing. Because
Might I add, you have guys like Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., or just to name a few. Keep in mind, we've had 30 cars on the racetrack, 30, 32. There's a lot of guys who still haven't ran their first race. Eric Almirola still hasn't showed up to the party. I believe I'm trying to go through the top of the list is here. I know Quinn Hoff has only done one race, I believe. There's a lot of guys who've either done only 1 to 2 races, and then there's some guys who haven't even done a single race. So how do you think that's fair to guys like Kevin Harvick or Martin Truex Jr. if it were ever implemented on the Cup side, or the Xfinity trucks, which would even be even more chaotic, it would seem.
Yeah, like just looking at the list here for, like, if there's any drivers that are not taking part in it, like you mentioned, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex, those are just the first 2 names right off the bat that are absent from the list. I'm just looking. I mean, those are the 2 most notable names. But then you go on the IndyCar side. There's a lot of names on IndyCar that are not taking part in this. And some of it given is because there's just a lack of software that's available. But Marco Andretti is not on the list. Ryan Hunter-Ray isn't on the list. There's, let's see.
Hinchcliffe got disconnected week 1.
Well, I mean, Hinchcliffe was actually, yeah, Hinchcliffe was he was on the entry list for this last weekend, but
he got disconnected at Watkins Glen. What do you do in the case of a disconnection?
Yeah, and
some guys have better subs than others.
Yeah,
do not finish and just take it.
Yeah, I mean, you do not want to have a status listed on Racing Reference for the fact that you couldn't finish a race because of lack of internet connection. I mean, I would not want to be put in Lando Norris's position where he could not get connected before the race even started. Or what's even worse, let's say you have a 45-lap race, you're doing really well, you've led the whole thing, and you're coming to the start-finish line to take the checkered flag, and then suddenly the connection dies out.
User disconnected.
Disconnected.
Or even in the case of, let's say you got at everybody at let's just say a Michigan in a IndyCar race. They're on the restart. They're 3, 4, 5, 6 wide, and however wide you want to get at Michigan, because it's pretty much it's so big that you can fit 10 cars and you still wouldn't all make it through. And the guy on the bottom disconnects, which he can't control his race car, so that shoots him up the racetrack and collects everybody else. What do you do in a situation like that? And if you don't have, what do you do in a situation like that? And if you have a disconnect, so there's not a good way to convert it to just the regular side of things, unless you have all these drivers in a condensed area to make sure that you have the rows upon rows where like they do for the Fortnite tournaments, and where they're just all compacted in, and you can monitor it. But you can't do that either, because you gotta be 6 feet apart, and you can't gather 100 people in the same location at the moment.
Yeah, it's not good. Like, the consequences that could result from this are not good. And speaking of a series maybe going just a little too far on treating this thing seriously, which I do want to emphasize, just because we're being critical of iRacing and how serious it is being taken, we're not trying to diss on like those who are actively involved in the sim racing community.
Not at all. Not at all. We're talking about apples. We're trying to combine apples and oranges is the thing. I think people understand that. And iRacing is one thing, actual racing is another thing. They're very similar, but you cannot combine the two.
Right.
You can't combine the two into a Frankenstein. Then again, NASCAR has done Frankensteins and for however long since the Brian France era. So,
Years.
I mean, we'll see what happens here, but this would be definitely the weirdest combination we would have seen in a long time.
Al, you
Yes,
look like you've got something on your mind.
I do. I wanted to play devil's advocate on here for so long on the disconnect thing. So allow me to play devil's advocate. What is the difference between a guy disconnecting and his steering wheel braking in the turn while they're going 5 wide?
Hmm.
Now tell me that they have exactly the same amount of control right there. Okay, my steering wheel broke. I disconnected from this race. Whatever happens to this car, I can't control it. And whatever happens to their cars, I can't control what happens there either.
Well, I do want to ask one question, and I know that we might not know the answer to this because I don't think like Justin, how you guys aren't on iRacing. I don't think. Yeah, because I'm not on it either, and that's kind of the downside of this argument. But if an iRacing simulator disconnects, um, I keep thinking, would it just go straight the car that you're driving, or does it just vanish into thin air like it
I
would on an online racing game?
I
I
think it
think
typically vanishes.
I think it's both. I think it's both where you like you have seconds where your car's still going and then it disconnects. I'm not 100% positive, but I think that would be most likely the case. Is because like if you like even I'm thinking of other games where you lag out and you keep going in the same direction as you were formerly going, and then you disconnect, you're still going forward for those few seconds before you disconnect. So I think that's plausible for a car to keep going. I don't think it would be able to cause a wreck on the front on a straightaway, but I could definitely see it causing and mayhem in a turn.
Yeah, I mean, on a turn especially, it would not be pretty. But
I mean, try doing that at Sonoma into the yeah, what do you call it? The very turn 11, just the sharp corner there,
yeah,
or at Martinsville where you have at the barrels. I'm just going back to NASCAR 2006 where you can pile up 40 cars just by hitting one of them into the barrel.
uh,
At Sonoma, I'd call it the Tony Stewart on Denny Hamlin.
oh man, let's. So speaking of series taking iRacing just a little more seriously than it probably should, let's talk about Bubba Wallace. So yeah,
That's a
this
good start.
subject is going to be a doozy to talk about. So I'm going to crack open my drink and start getting this ready. Don't worry, it's a Coca-Cola Mini. So what happened was Bubba Wallace had a terrible, terrible afternoon on Sunday. I think he got wrecked twice within the first 10 laps, and then Clint Boyer put him in the wall
Intentionally.
on lap 10, and then Bubba just had enough, and his live stream, he had it going, and then he basically had enough and said, well, I quit. Thanks, guys.
Peace out.
That was done. He said, peace out. So he ended the stream 10 laps in, and it was so unfortunate because his reason for like his status on Racing Reference for the race, his status initially said rage quit. Now it just says quit, which I mean it's not really that accurate, but I mean it's accurate but not that accurate. Anyway, here's what surprised me and got a lot of people's attention. Blue-Emu, the sponsor that was on Bubba Wallace's car, and I believe has even been on Bubba's car for an actual race this season. Like through the first 4 races, I'm gonna have a look at Bubba Wallace's sponsors now because he's all right. He was 18th in the standings. Okay, no, he hadn't. But Blue-Emu had signed on for some races for Bubba Wallace to be an actual sponsor. they proceeded to ditch him after the race in one of the most bizarre sponsor to driver Twitter exchanges that I can remember in a very long time. So Blue-Emu basically just dumped Bubba Wallace over some of his actions in a race that isn't real. Hallie Step, first of all, whose side are you on? Yeah, is it Blue-Emu or Bubba? I gotta ask.
I'm on Bubba Wallace's side. I have multiple points to make here. First of all, Blue-Emu, I now understand. I questioned this all my life. Why did the Australians have a war against emus? I understand now. How dare you? How dare you do this over a virtual race? I played video games for too long. I understand the pain of what Bubba Wallace was going through right there. And there are two options you go through once you get to that third wreck. Do I want to just quit right here while I still have my sanity? Or do I want to smash something in this room because I'm getting real angry right now? I'll tell you which looks even worse for a sponsor: when your driver smashes his steering wheel over his desk. I would recommend he quit right there because he'll feel a lot better later on. Everyone will be like, that's funny, he quit. But no, you had to make it a big serious thing by ditching him over a virtual race. A virtual race. I mean, what? Well, why are you even? You just wanted a way out, is what I'm getting from that. You wanted a way out from sponsoring him, and you found your way out, and you decided to make a big deal of it, and everyone thinks you're a goof now. Ridiculous.
Justin, and Bubba or Blue-Emu?
I gotta side with Bubba, but here's the thing about it. I get it, Bubba. I get the personality of Bubba Wallace. I get that he's a driver that doesn't take crap from nobody. We've seen that before with Kyle Busch at Watkins Glen last year. If he's ticked off, he's going to do what he wants. He's that type of driver, like Tony Stewart and Kyle Busch. And keep in mind, Tony Stewart has done that before. 2006 Richmond, only I looked on Racing Reference, and it marks it as a electrical failure instead of quit.
Right.
Because he parked Kevin Harvick's Xfinity car back in 06. Last time he ever ran at Richmond, and in a Busch Series car, or I think one of the final times he did for Kevin Harvick. But besides that point, yes, I think Blue-Emu definitely wanted a way out of that contract. But also, for Bubba Wallace, you have no leverage right now. You have no leverage right now in the sport. You are right now in the 20s in the standing on a team that is in financial trouble. You need to keep the sponsors happy. No matter what you do. And I'm going to play devil's advocate here. You represent your sponsor both inside and outside this on and off the racetrack. Like, what you do outside the racetrack does have consequences. It's the stuff that Tony Stewart did outside of NASCAR, or whether it's Australia, whether it's other dirt track incidents, that affects sponsorship. What Kyle Busch did in the Truck Series in 2011 almost got M&M's to leave him. That almost cost him the M&M sponsorship. Again, on track incident, but what you do on and off the racetrack affects you, the team you represent, and the sponsors that you who represent. And right now, Richard Petty needs every single sponsorship he has to keep that team alive. He's not getting bailed out by Worldwide Technology. I don't think he's getting bailed out yet again. but you have so Bubba, I get it, but you also have to represent and your sponsors both on and off the racetrack. I'm not saying what Blue-Emu did was right. I think it was completely wrong for them to ditch him like that, and I think it was kind of a cheap move. But Bubba needs to keep this in mind as he goes forward.
Yeah, I'm gonna. In terms of whether I side with Bubba or Blue-Emu, it's mostly on the side of Bubba. Now, I will give Blue-Emu this. Bubba Wallace, and you mentioned it, Justin, Bubba Wallace is the type of driver who, I mean, he wears his heart out on his sleeve. It's pretty cut and dry that it's obvious that whatever he's feeling, he's going to convey that emotion out there. The biggest problem, I think, that the biggest mistake that I think he made was he just shut off the stream, basically. If anything, he could have continued on and just laughed at, oh, look, Clint Boyer's wrecking again. Just stuff like that. And keep the stream going until the race was eventually over. And you also mentioned drivers are representing their sponsors. Bubba didn't do anything to directly insult Blue-Emu, which is something I have a problem with concerning Blue-Emu just left him like that. But, I mean, I can understand, like, if Blue-Emu had sat down Bubba Wallace, like, in private, behind closed doors, behind just out of the public light, and said, what you did was something we didn't like, we're going to part ways. If they had handled it like that, they would have come out looking much better. Instead, they took what I call a rich energy approach and just ditched him on Twitter in a very public way. Like I will pull up the tweet that
it was not a good PR move.
It's a terrible PR move. It's terrible.
And that was just a cowardice move.
Yeah, there it is.
The fact that you did it on Twitter is a cowardice move. And again, and I think you're right in that Bubba Wallace should not have turned off that stream. I think if he went to a public, let's just say a public lobby going on, unlike another race on iRacing, there's thousands of races on iRacing going on, and he ran a race on another league. He didn't have to, represent NASCAR at that point. And I think that would have been fine. But turning off the stream was a mistake, and I think he recognizes that. But also, keep in mind, and that was his third wreck of the day, and he's already used up his two resets they got, which that definitely extended the race a little bit, I will say, for Bristol. But I would not recommend doing two at a short track again. But again, Bubba Wallace needs every sponsor he get. He can't need, like, every sponsor right now to Bubba Wallace is every sponsor that's keeping that 43 car on the racetrack, and that's a big, 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 big loss to NASCAR if that number goes, and we might get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, it's critical. It's critical for Bubba to keep every sponsorship. I mean, sponsorship is everything in not just NASCAR, but in motorsports in general. If you don't have a sponsor, there's not much money going in there.
What do you think on this?
I am just absolutely furious because I want to put the logistics of this out there. Not the logistics, just the downright facts of how this would sound to the regular person. And this is bad for Blue-Emu to hear. You just ditched a guy during a pandemic. That's what happened. During a pandemic, you just ditched a driver for no good reason. I can't stress the first three words, during a pandemic. People are going to be looking, people have a lot of time to look at your company right now, and they're going to see that and go, I don't want to support that anyway. This was a negative move. This moved the bar out of your favor in every single way. Every person watching that race is going, I know what Bubba's thinking right there. I get it. Because everyone who's played a video game understands that feeling so well.
Yeah.
And we could play you got to carry yourself this way. They don't say that during a video game. Tony Stewart went on iRacing when he was a race car driver, not retired. He didn't lose any sponsors, and I bet he wasn't nice to many people either.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I do want to bring up the like even though it is just like I know some diehard like iRacing enthusiasts out there, they will insist it's not a game, it's a simulation. But considering, like, point taken, but still considering what this type of series is and then the type of challenge that these drivers have to face, there's 3 words. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real life. I mean, yeah, the drivers driving it are real life, but it's a computer. It's a simulation.
It's a blessing and a curse. It plain and simple. It's a blessing and a curse that iRacing is so realistic. And I mean, it's done wonders for us who are looking for racing content. And right now, whether that's actual or virtual, well, I mean, because right now, the ratings for iRacing, they're phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. They're breaking records for like quote unquote video game or simulation or whatever you want to call it. They're breaking every single record out there. So it's been great for iRacing. But it's the honey. But like I said at the beginning, the honeymoon period, right? I think the honeymoon period is over. And I really hope this week we can, because there's only going to be one race this week. It's going to be only one official race this weekend, and that's going to be the Michigan race. I really hope we can all take a step back and just enjoy iRacing for what it is.
Yeah.
A distraction and a simulation and just for fun. I don't want to see any more off-track or bureaucracy or whatever NASCAR decides to do. I don't want to see the interference of the outside world continuing to affect the on-track product at both iRacing and when we get back to racing. And now, if you want to test out the only way I want to see anything crossing over is the potential for new ideas, such as new racetracks.
Well, I do want to keep on talking about iRacing because there was a really interesting development that we learned about, like at the start of this week, and then it really intensified yesterday because there have been some drivers that have been giving criticism to iRacing, not like bashing iRacing, but just trying to give some feedback, constructive criticism. In the sim racing community, it's been thrown around the idea that there are some higher ups at iRacing that are not taking very kindly to drivers, like real life drivers, like guys like Scott Dixon. He was the big one last week that tried to give constructive criticism to iRacing. There's been a lot of talk that iRacing heads from higher up, they are not taking very kindly to drivers saying that it's not the like 100% authentic of the real thing, which to me, it's not a good look on iRacing because obviously you're not going to be always like, you'll try to get as close as you can to the real thing, but it's not the real thing. You're never going to replicate what real racing out in reality what it is. So it surprised me so much when Roger Penske, who not only is a team owner in IndyCar, but as of last November, the president and owner of the IndyCar series and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, he basically contacted iRacing and just pulling out, like, Hal, you love WWE. What Roger Penske did was jump from the top rope and slam iRacing onto the turnbuckle. Basically, Penske told iRacing execs, you either listen to what my drivers have to say on their feedback, And if you turn them away, I'm pulling everybody out.
including the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Yeah, it was it was like, talk about power move flex 101. That was, I mean, that was a huge move. And obviously, like, there was an audio clip from the Marshall Pruitt podcast where it exaggerated a little more on iRacing's response to Scott Dixon's comments. iRacing basically, I mean, obviously they didn't take too kindly to it, but I wanted to, I forget exactly what was said, but it was almost saying like IndyCar. I forget the best way to put it. I've got to look it up somehow, but just talk about a power move. Hal Step, what do you think about all of this?
As a advocate for all power moves that might be in my top 5, I'm very proud of Roger Penske. You support your drivers, and he did so in a big way. You are, first of all, who are you not to listen to real life drivers on feedback? Who are you to do such a thing? You gotta have a real big head not to listen to Scott Dixon. I mean, even before I even got huge into IndyCar, I knew Scott Dixon was. Everybody should know the name, and you're not gonna listen to him? Are you kidding me? Roger Penske, 100%. Love the power move. I like to imagine he did a Vince McMahon strut to the phone before he did it. Gave that big gravelly voice. Now, who do you think you are?
It definitely was a power move, but I mean, I kind of get where iRacing is coming from. And again, I keep playing the devil's advocate tonight. But iRacing has been doing this for about 2 decades now. Well, almost 2 decades. And so they, like, I think they kind of got into a false sense of, we know what we're doing. We don't need to listen to these guys. And that's just stupid. And that's how you lose your core clientele. Oh, and in a time like this, it's Penske pulling that card out was absolutely maybe a little bit too much overkill, but it definitely got the point across that no, we're in charge here, or you either fix it or we're pulling out. And if I know Roger Penske, he would probably turn around and start making his own game. And that and a competition between iRacing and whatever would come out of that. Heck, I mean, fans have been clamoring for an IndyCar game for so long. We to actually maybe get that going. I'm just thinking of the possibilities here. Or I mean, and I don't know much WWE, but that would sound like a WWF versus WCW type deal to me.
To me, with how that would go, I just thinking about the idea of iRacing, thinking pulling the we've been doing this for so long, we know what we're doing. That would remind me of like how it goes in the video game industry in general, where you get that false sense of security and the quality of the product suffers. And if you pull that, you will destroy what makes iRacing. You should be listening to these drivers and going, I can make this even more realistic. You should see it as an opportunity to make it even better. And when you start getting that big head going, you turn into EA where you're kind of going, well, we're going to get your money anyway, but we know what's best. And as it's been shown by EA winning worst company in America over and over for the past decade, probably not a great idea.
Yeah, like you have drivers out there, like Scott Dixon, trying to get feedback to iRacing, and yet it seems like they're not really willing to listen. And you even have what Jimmy Johnson and Kyle Busch. We mentioned it. I mean, obviously, they're two of the best drivers in this era of NASCAR. They're struggling out there on iRacing, and I'm sure they're trying to give some feedback because the transition, even guys like Alexander Rossi, they were saying the transition from a real car to an iRacing simulator is not really the same thing. there's a difference there. It's like a big gap, like a big jump from having to do one thing, and then you have to approach your racing style in a totally different way when it comes to iRacing. And if iRacing is not willing to listen to criticism, it's a terrible look on them. Like, they're not willing to improve their product. They're fine with the way it is.
It's almost like I want to say like EA not having competition from 2K. When it came to Madden, once you become the alpha dog, once you've established yourself as the alpha, I mean, because there were games back then, NASCAR Heat, the EA series, there was always competition between iRacing and NASCAR. There was almost a little bit of realism with the games like 30 Daytona that really challenged iRacing to become the best. But once you get up to the top, and this goes across all in video game industries, once you get to the top, there's not much. You always almost seem to regress. That seems like, I mean, the reason why 2K has survived for as long, was good for as long it was. I mean, it's starting to decline a little, was because NBA Live was right on its tail for the longest of times. There's always a second product. I mean, but now with NASCAR games and racing games are now becoming a lot more archaic. You have a lot more of an archaic feeling with NASCAR Heat series. You feel with the Tony Stewart or sprint car game, and you even feel a little bit with F1 2019. And although that is probably the most realistic out of the three, iRacing has always been the pinnacle. Oh, it has been the golden standard, and the only thing that tops it is the actual experience. So I think this is going to be good for iRacing in the long run. I think it's definitely going to be a wake-up call saying we can make this product better. And since it is the temporary, for the time being, let's make it the best possible. So that way, when this is over, we can still give people as close to the actual experience as humanly possible. And maybe we can even upcharge them for it.
Maybe.
And down the line, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, they should listen to the feedback of the drivers now. That way, like, when this pandemic subsides, like, the future of iRacing, if they listen to the drivers, if they promote some of their guys that compete there regularly, that aren't
Danny Hamlin's driver is huge. He's starting to get some offers, I hear.
Yeah, if they promote those guys that regularly take place on simulated racing, like the stars there, if they promote them, it could be a win-win situation for iRacing. That's basically what I'm trying to say there.
Win-win for iRacing and a win-win for NASCAR. It may provide a much cheaper alternative. Mm-hmm. And again, that you're not trying to kill out the dirt series. Let's make that clear. But from what it may, people, you can't go out and buy a $50,000 sprint car or however much it is these days. Not many people can do that. It's almost a rich man's business now. But iRacing for $30 here and there, or over a span of a couple of years, that's something. And if you put the time and effort in, you can make something out of it, and you might even get a couple of eyes. It's to get you in a $50,000 sprint car to progress higher and higher up. That's how William Byron got his start, and that's how William Byron is in the 24 car, the iconic 24 car today.
Yeah, I mean, iRacing can be a big thing. It already is a big thing, especially right now. It can become even better. We've talked on a lot about iRacing, so now let's cut to our man Hal Estep with the weekly Money Team update. Tell us, Hal, what have you got for us? Please let there be something.
So, this is awkward. I don't have anything, so let's speculate on who's going to be in the 50 car next year.
Oh, no.
So Jeffrey Earnhardt's the leading candidate because he's the only candidate. I'd like to throw out some other names. I think Jimmy Johnson actually wants to go to the 50 car because two more numbers than 48. All I'm saying is look into it.
I could see Quinn Hoff maybe making a jump up if things don't turn out well at Go Fast. I mean, not Go Fast, but Starcom Racing. He's not doing too well right now. They may give the job back to Landon Castle. But I could see him because he's got money. I think they're going to be going for a guy who has money.
Who I bet would have a lot of money if he came back. I think you know where I'm going with this. Colombian native Carl Edwards. If you're Floyd Mayweather, you got a lot of money. You throw it at that man. You tell him,
Carl Edwards.
I will give you all the money if you come to my team.
Yeah.
He won't say yes, but it's worth a shot,
I mean, that would ruin his Hall of Fame chances this year.
Yeah. In fact, now that that subject has been broached, I actually want to talk about that. The NASCAR Hall of Fame nominees for 2021, Columbia's own Carl Edwards has been nominated.
Man, I feel old now.
Yeah, I mean, and it surprised me because Edwards was actually shocked by being nominated. But it just goes to show how well liked he is in the sport. Let's look at this. The modern era ballot. You got Neil Bonnet, Jeff Burton, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Carl Edwards, Harry Gant, Harry Hyde, Larry Phillips, Ricky Rudd, Kirk Shelmerdine, and Mike Stefanik. I'm trying to. Let's see. There's also the Pioneer ballot: Jake Elder, Red Farmer, Banjo Matthews, Herschel McGriff, Ralph Moody, Janet Guthrie, Alvin Hawkins, Mike Helton, Dr. Joseph Mattioli, and Ralph Seagraves. So, I mean, yeah, it's a big thing. Obviously, it's a big thing to be nominated for the NASCAR Hall of Fame. But they introduced the modern era and pioneer ballots for the first time. The list includes 5 first-time Hall of Fame nominees, being Burton Jr., Jake Elder, Banjo Matthews, and Carl Edwards. And I'm trying to find it on here. I'm trying to get rid of that video on the side. Let's see. The NASCAR Hall of Fame will consist of 2 inductees from modern era nominees and 1 from the list of pioneer nominees, for a total of 3 new inductees in 2021. So, I mean, for Carl Edwards and guys like Jeff Burton, Dale Jr., I'm trying to phrase it, who do you think gets in on the first round?
Dale Jr. There's not a chance he doesn't get in.
I think the fans would riot if Dale Jr. is not a first ballot Hall of Famer. That is almost guaranteed. Yeah. Now, everybody else in this class, because again, I feel so bad because this 2020's class, the Joe Gibbs class, was a phenomenal class. Almost every single every single person was going to get in that year, it felt like. But this year, it's going to be tough for a lot of these guys. I mean, Ricky Rudd still hasn't gotten in. Carl Edwards, he's going to be very highly considered. And again, as a Tony Stewart fan, you always feel guilty about 2011. And I mean, Carl Edwards should have been at least a NASCAR champion. He was a flat tire, a position, and a successful block going his way from being a 3-time NASCAR champion.
Yeah.
I don't think you could say not even Mark Martin has had that much heartbreak.
Well, had Mark Martin not gotten the point penalty in 1989, he would have been the champion.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, I think Dale Jr. is easily a first ballot Hall of Famer. Even though there's going to be some detractors that say, "Well, he's only a 15-time most popular driver. He never won a Cup championship." Doesn't matter. He's a great ambassador for the sport. That's what I mean. His name alone got a lot of attention to NASCAR. So Dale Jr. to me, first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think that's a question. Who else gets in? Just looking at the nominees, you got Neil Bonnet and Jeff Burton. I actually don't think Carl Edwards gets in on the first try. But I think they're going to go with someone like honestly, I think it'd be great to see Mike Stefanik get in there.
I agree. I really have been clamoring for him to get in before or a lot of these guys. I think as for him as a 9-time NASCAR champ, has 9 NASCAR championships.
Mm-hmm.
It's for him not to get in and yet is a little bit embarrassing. I was really hoping, and he might slip in last year's class, but obviously he's deserving of the Hall of Fame, and I if it's not this year, it's gotta be soon. It's gotta be soon because I'm looking at the 22 class. I mean, obviously you're gonna have Matt Kenseth next year are going in, but after that, it's going to be the same exact class coming into it.
Yeah, especially considering how Stefanik died in a plane crash last September.
Yeah, this has got to be the year. This has got to be the year for him.
Yeah, Hal, anything to like who else do you think gets in for the Hall of Fame?
I'm trying to think of that second driver. That was the one that was really all you could think looking at the list was Dale Jr. is the definite. Everyone else, that's gonna be tough with only one more slot. And if I had to, it should be Stefanik, but I also have doubts because they're obviously haven't been valuing the Whelen Modified Series if they haven't put him in yet. So I'm thinking that who they might pick is Ricky Rudd because he's been waiting a while and retired sooner than Jeff Burton. It becomes a seniority argument. I think it should be Stefanik, but I'd go with Ricky Rudd probably is who it's gonna be.
I almost feel like 2022 is going to be the Roush class. Yes. I feel like next year it's going to be the Roush class with Edwards and Kenseth. I really hope Stefanik gets in. As far as the the Pioneer ballot, that's going to be very tough between, I would say Moody and I would say Banjo Matthews. I think Banjo Matthews is long overdue. He finally got on the ballot this year. I think he's long overdue. 250 wins, that's very hard to ignore. I think Banjo gets in this year for the Pioneer class.
Well, I wouldn't throw out Red Farmer either. He's a 3-time late model sportsman champion. He won the 1956 modified champion, and if I remember correctly, I think he actually won the first NASCAR race ever run. I'll have to look that up and think it's wrong, but
he's got a good case, but again, if you haven't put in good old Mike, I don't think he's getting in quite yet, unless this is the year of the modifieds.
Yeah, and I stand corrected. Red Farmer did not win the first NASCAR race ever run. I was off the mark on that. As I look at it's Red Byron, not Red Farmer. Red Byron.
Red Byron, Red Baron.
Red Byron.
We got a lot of red in the 1950s of 1950s, 1940s in NASCAR.
Yeah. So it'll be fun. It'll be like just give it a few months, and there will be 3 new inductees for the NASCAR Hall of Fame class of 2021. Whoever gets in should be very interesting to see, and congratulations to all of these people for being nominated for the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Uh, Now going to the latest changes in schedule. There have been a lot that have been going on. Well, actually, not much has changed for a few, but I do want to bring up the IndyCar schedule because that schedule has changed quite a bit since the last week. For those who have not heard the news, the Detroit Grand Prix that was set for Belle Isle Park has been canceled. So there will be no racing in Detroit this season. The first race that is on their schedule that is set um, to be raced is the Genesis 600 at Texas Motor Speedway on June 6th. I feel like that if the pandemic subsides fast enough, that's a race that it has to be run. I mean, Justin, wouldn't you agree?
At this point, and especially with the way NASCAR's looking at their schedule, I think if they do, like, I think that has to be their opportunistic race that they would want to get in. And because I think the 600 is becoming one of those races where it's a crown jewel in terms of IndyCar races. I mean, we talk about NASCAR where we have the Brickyard, the Coca-Cola, the Daytona, and the Southern. And those are the four universal crown jewels at Bristol and Martinsville if you want. But I think the 600 has become a crown jewel for the IndyCar series. And getting rid of that, like, IndyCar is going to do everything in their power to get that race in, whether that is now or whether that's potentially moving it all the way out until November or October when the Cup guys come there for what is hopefully their third final race. I think that's going to be one of the races you cannot leave off your schedule no matter what.
Yeah. Um, I'll go ahead and share the screen on this because the site that I'm on now is the official IndyCar website. So here you go. This is their schedule now. The Genesis 600 at Texas, then they go to Road America, Richmond, then Indianapolis. Here's where the first big change, aside from Detroit being canceled, here's the first big one. Iowa Speedway now becomes a Friday and Saturday night doubleheader. So interesting race that will be. Then what was originally the season finale at Laguna Seca, Firestone Grand Prix of Monterey, that becomes a Saturday-Sunday doubleheader. And perhaps the most interesting part about all of this, another race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course has been set up for October 3rd. Now, as of now, it is the season finale. However, there hasn't been an official date set for the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg, which has been announced that they will schedule it somewhere. They just haven't figured out where yet. So I think just out of all of these schedule changes, Hal Leastep, what's the most intriguing change, in your opinion?
Adding the Indy Road Course event at the end of the year, because we were kind of going, that's where the St. Petersburg event could go, and the season strong with a race everyone loves, or just ended at Laguna Seca like usual. Well, that's out of nowhere to me. I'm kind of confused, intrigued, and I want to see the kind of a rationale behind that. I guess it would be that it's Indy, and that's just iconic. You want to end it on an iconic racetrack. I get that. I mean, I could see that. But also, I noticed there's a bunch of gaps with like 2 weeks between races. I think that's where they're trying to squeeze in maybe the St. Petersburg race.
Yeah, like there's a nice little gap between Iowa and Mid-Ohio. There's also, let's have a look. There's 2 weeks between the Indy 500 and Mid-Ohio. You're not going to get a race there because it's going to be 2 weeks for the abbreviated month of August for Indianapolis. There's 2 weeks between Gateway and Portland, and 2 weeks between Laguna Seca and the third race for the GP event at Indianapolis. I feel like if you're going to try to fit in a race in St. Petersburg, even though you could try to shoot for like July 25th or August 2nd, I don't think IndyCar is going to do that because, for one, in St. Petersburg in late summer, like July, early August, it's going to be hot. So I don't think they want to exhaust the fans and drivers. I would think they're going to slap it on the end of the schedule, maybe October 10th or 17th, and put it there for the season finale. Justin, go ahead.
I think that's what they got to do. And the one thing, the third IndyCar race, that just doesn't seem right to me. Something's got to be at play because you have one race on the road course. You have the Indianapolis 500, the granddaddy of them all. What's the point in having a third race? What's the third point in having a race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway if you've already used up the 2 tracks?
Well,
I'm starting to that just is starting to go through my head. I'm thinking, what could be there's gotta be something else at play here. There's gotta be something else at play here. I don't know what it is, and I can't put my finger on it. Maybe I can actually. Maybe because I know Indy is installing lights around the facility, not the grandstand, not like lights for the track. But I'm starting to wonder if that may be their game plan going forward, or to see if they can get lights at Indy. I'm not sure though.
yeah, I'm trying to think. October 3rd. That is, I'm trying
It's a
to.
weird date. It's a weird date, especially with Midwest as Illinois weather. Usually in October, it's very wet. It's very wet, and especially for some reason on Saturdays and Sundays in October in Illinois. I can tell you because I ran cross country for 4 years. It's always cold. It's always wet. No matter what happens, it's always cold and it's always wet.
Yeah, I just checked on the calendar on my phone. October 3rd is on a Saturday. So I don't know if there are plans to get lights there. Maybe I don't know for sure though.
It just seems weird to me that they would go back to Indy for a third time and not go to an alternative track. I would almost think a track like Michigan. Again, Michigan hasn't been on the schedule for a while. I get that, but I would almost think a track like Michigan or Watkins Glen would be better suited.
Yeah, I would like to see them go back to Watkins Glen. I mean, I know they gave up Watkins Glen to go to Portland, but at the same time, I'm like, do they really have to give up the Glen? But it would be nice to see them go back. But for them to go to Indianapolis again, I'm not sure. This could be another try at running 2 races like they used to with Texas a while back. Just I don't know. It seems like it's an experiment.
It seems like an experiment of some sort, and it's almost it's a mystery. It's a mystery, and it's kind of puzzling, and it's interesting. We'll have to see what happens, but if there's something involved with it, I'm game.
Yeah. Anyway, also on the NASCAR schedule, no major changes have been announced since um, since last week. There was a last week we did have a look at the best case scenario, and Martinsville and NASCAR, they have not yet officially announced that that race is postponed or canceled, which is a little surprising to me, I'll admit. But like they're holding out their hope on trying to run that race, and I find it ironic that Blue-Emu sponsors that race. But that aside, they're looking at ideally looking at a return at the Coke. Now, considering that IndyCar has postponed or not even postponed, they've canceled race in Detroit, which was set for May 31st, May 30th, 31st. Considering they've canceled that race, NASCAR runs at Kansas Speedway, ironically, the backdrop I've got. They run there. It's scheduled for May 30th, 31st, May 31st. Does NASCAR go to Kansas Speedway or not? I'll start with Justin.
As much as I would love them to go to Kansas, I think May is going to be too early. I don't think they're running at Kansas or the spring race. Maybe in the summer, and they'll probably run in the fall, but I don't see them running a Kansas race this year in the spring. Now?
Yeah, I don't see it. May is too early. That is a month and a half away. I don't see everything getting back to where we can have a race under normal circumstances at the end of May.
It's difficult to imagine. I know, because I mean, if Detroit got canceled, I feel like Kansas is going to inevitably get postponed. It's only
Charlotte too.
And Charlotte too. So, yeah, we don't know when racing's coming back, basically. And now that makes me think, because last night I was having a conversation with some of my other motorsports journalism friends. They were talking about how, like we just brought up the Xfinity and Truck Series schedule. With the way that this season is playing out, if the pandemic is, because it's hard to tell if we've reached a peak yet in this country. If the peak eventually comes, actually no, it will come. I don't know what I'm saying.
It will come eventually. We don't know if we're over it.
The peak will come if it hasn't come already. Once the pandemic subsides, racing will probably get back, but now there's discussion. The virus could come back in the fall, and if it does, that's going to throw everything off schedule. What are the options left for Motorsports Series then if it comes back? Are there any options for Motorsports if the virus comes back in the fall? Just what's your take on it?
If it comes back in the fall, there isn't really an option because we're going to see. I would presume to say we'd see the same reaction of, all right, we got to shut everything back down, which is personally why I'm just kind of like, these things come in waves. Just because it's working doesn't mean you should immediately jump to reopen everything, because that's how you accelerate the next wave. So I would say that if it comes back in the fall, we're not getting a finish of the season. That's what's going to happen.
I think if it comes back for a second wave, no matter when that is, that's when the season's got to be called. That's when the season's got to be called, and you got to start preparing for 2021 and preparing for the worst case scenario of trying to get teams to 2021. Because there is, and again, I'm very concerned about if they get back to the racetrack and I had this concern when we're talking about NASCAR going to Atlanta. I had the concern of if one guy has it, it's not just that one guy, it's that team and likely half the garage are just going to get it. So that's for IndyCar, that's for F1, that's for every single racing organization out there. One guy gets it and everything's going to have to shut down again. So I really hope that second wave doesn't come. However, the likelihood of that is very real. Well, I wouldn't say it's going to happen. I'm hoping it doesn't. But if it does happen, they gotta shut everything down. I think F1 and IndyCar would be better for it, but NASCAR would definitely have its issues with the playoff system. I'm still intact.
I mean, and I'm not trying to like be an alarmist or anything by saying, well, there could be a second wave happening, because the bottom line is we don't know for sure yet.
It's a very realistic possibility that needs to be talked about.
Yeah, it could happen. And if it does, I think racing as we know it, the season's over. I mean, at this point, if they don't get back to racing within the next like 2 to 3 months, the season's pretty much lost. So if NASCAR does get back to racing, I would suggest not even have the playoffs just for this one season, because it's an unprecedented time that we're living in. And as for IndyCar and F1, their championship systems aren't going to be affected because they don't have a playoff system.
Maybe get rid of the double points for IndyCar, but
but at the same time, though, all three of these series and for other motorsports, like, and I forgot to bring up the NHRA schedule. Their first race is scheduled for Gainesville Raceway on June 5th over in Florida. But just looking at some of the I lost my train of thought briefly, but
just looking at like all the racing as in a whole, they gotta be prepared to deal with a second wave.
yeah.
They gotta be ready for it, because if a second wave hits, you cannot go back to 2020. You gotta throw out 2020 altogether, and get everybody to 2021, or as many teams as possible. Because if you cannot get teams to 2021, and things are going to start having the domino effect is already in motion. It's just going to be how bad a collateral is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to. I'm
I was trying to help you there.
Yeah, I forgot my train of thought there, but just thinking about if it does come back, forget it. Don't even try with the season. I mean, it's for the sake of the public. Just don't jeopardize the drivers or the teams or the crews or the fans or the media members. They gotta call it as they see it. If someone's sick in the garage and they have the virus, it's instant chaos. Mm-hmm. So better to err on the side of caution, better to be safe than sorry. And as for the Motorsports series, they're all going to be suffering financially. And that jumps into my next point. Zach Brown, who is the team principal for McLaren F1, earlier he talked with the BBC and was saying that kind of hinted that as much as 4 teams on the F1 grid could shut down if the financial situation is not resolved. And I think we know one of the obvious teams that could shut down, the American-based Haas F1. But I gotta think what other teams could shut down, because, like, and I'm gonna speculate, and it's probably not the best look, but Williams does not seem to be in the best situation because they've been hiring a lot of drivers that have money with them. In my opinion, it's Haas, Williams, Alfa Romeo, and likely AlphaTauri. All 4 of those teams could be in some big financial trouble if the situation isn't resolved. And for Haas F1, they were out the door. Yeah, they were considering just leaving the sport entirely after this season, and even without the pandemic affecting, because there's just not enough money going to the team. F1 cannot afford to lose any teams right now. I mean, their grid is already pretty short. I mean, even though it's 20 cars, which sounds like a lot, it's still one of their shorter grids they've had in a long time. Because I know when Haas first entered the sport, there were 22. And at the start of the last decade, in 2010, there were 24 cars out there. And it's not a good time right now, financially, for F1 or for anybody at this point. Justin, you were going to say something?
I think that's pretty much been the 3. I mean, and I've definitely heard you probably got 3 of the four, or I've heard one more, and I can't think of it at the top of my head. But I think there's definitely 5 teams in the running. I think Haas F1 is the team that has been speculated to have been and going. And I think that's pretty fair to say. I'm not going to speculate on the rest of them. But you look at F1, and yeah, these teams are kind of at the bottom when it comes to the grid. But they are still huge for the loss of F1. F1 cannot afford any more teams going, and F1's got to make sure they keep as many of these teams alive as possible, as many of them as they can. But if they're having that many teams considering shutting down on the F1 side, right, I look at the NASCAR side and the IndyCar side, and I'm seeing just as many proportionately as I do for F1. And it's very realistic that NASCAR is going to have similar numbers, not just because it's apples to oranges, as people are going to say that, but you also look at 2008 and what that did to NASCAR. NASCAR had 43 teams full time that year. Or you had you had a bunch of part timers. Out of those 43 teams, you had 16 to 17 team in cars no longer on the racetrack. 16 to 17 cars no longer on the racetrack within 3 years. That raises concerns exponential. You had 22 of those cars are no longer with us today. That raises as many alarm bells as possible. And again, the reason why I keep mentioning Petty, why I got on Bubba Wallace, is because Petty is likely one of those teams that are looking in the eye of its final demise. And and we've known it's been coming in for years. But it's NASCAR cannot afford to lose any more cars. IndyCar cannot afford to lose any more cars. IndyCar's been gaining, and their traction's been stopped. NASCAR, for the past 2 years, has kind of been on the rise again. That momentum stopped, especially if you start losing cars. And the one other point I'll bring up before I'll shift it to how. Especially with NASCAR, it's a sell now. Oh, nobody's coming in. No, let's be very clear. There's only 2 teams that I can possibly think of coming in. An extra Spire car, which they would most likely be a back burner, or just sucking up money everywhere it goes, other than doing the formula that they did last year all the way up until Daytona.
Well, yeah.
And the money team. Those are the only 2 teams I can realistically see coming into the sport. And money team is a very big potentially see. But I see a lot of teams coming out, and you have a charter system that relies on the wealth of the sport. You've had charters go down from 10 million to 2.2 million in sales. What happens when there's more charters than there are actual teams? It's running full time. What happens to the value of a charter then? What happens to a charter then? It doesn't work. It doesn't work if you don't have 36 cars to operate. Because NASCAR is going to try to sell the price high around like 2 million, but nobody's going to buy. Nobody's going to buy.
Yeah.
Al, what do you think?
I think that's a flaw within the charter system itself. I've always been iffy on the charter system because buying into this sport and getting a car on the track was already expensive enough that then you added in charters and it became almost ridiculous to me. And this is going to show, well, I feel right and I don't like being right about that. This is something that I feel like we were just delaying the inevitable with a couple of these teams. Every year we went on, it was nice to see them around, and we would hope that they would get that uptick in performance, more sponsors, and they'd be able to start surviving on their own. But we knew that that wasn't a realistic possibility. With Petty, we've known for years it's coming. It's coming. It might be here. And with the teams in F1, I think that it is troubling, but F1's very expensive, so not getting your profits going for an entire season, that'll shut down a few teams. And what I would what I'm curious to see is in the coming years after this, because teams are going to shut down, is will we see them come back? Because I think as the economy recovers, you'll see some owners who left because of this virus think that was a freak occurrence. We can get back in the sport because that is not something that's just going to happen right in 5 years. That is something we haven't seen before, and I doubt we'll see that quickly again. So I think you might see them buy back in because right now they have to leave. Then they can recoup some of the lost earnings, and they can get back into sport. That's what I think could happen. It won't be as horrible as 2008 was, where the entire economy collapsed because the entire world's economy collapsed because it was financial mayhem. This is something completely different.
But but my question is, and again, this is very much a political discussion, and that could be, and I'd rather not steer that conversation, but you don't know what the economy is going to do. I mean, you look at Blue-Emu, they were looking for every excuse to get rid of Bubba Wallace. Sponsors are going to be looking for that. Every opportunity to leave right now.
The thing about the economy is it always recovers. Eventually, it always recovers. This is a cycle, and this is not part of the cycle. Quite frankly, people were saying for a while, because of how good things were going, that a recession was coming. This may have been the tipping point where the recession comes. The thing about a recession, it always ends, and then the economy recovers.
Yeah,
Does it get back to the prior highs? Maybe not, but it gets better.
Yeah, like because I'll admit I'm taking economics right now for the semester of classes, and it is kind of a cycle. What you notice about um, recessions and then economic expansions. Right now, the economy is in a recession. How long it will take for America to get out of the recession in the world, we don't know. It's a matter of how soon this pandemic gets contained, how much this virus is contained. Whenever an effective vaccine is perfected, which it could be tomorrow, it could be a year from now. And then just the recovery efforts and rebuilding, trying to get back on their feet, however long that will take. But yeah, the economy is going down right now. Sponsors are going to be hard to find. But if the right efforts are made, the sports might be able to survive. I'm going to share the screen again on the article that the BBC had for Zach Brown. If you look further up, you can see that after he made the statement that he could see 4 teams disappearing if it wasn't handled the right way, at least their financial situation, he said F1 is in a very fragile state at the moment. So here's the argument for why make the budget cap lower. And F1 and teams have already agreed on a series of changes to lower the costs because revenue is already dropping significantly as a result of not running these races. Delaying until 2022 a big rule change that had been planned for next season, forcing teams to run the same cars this year and next. Brown says all teams have now agreed to lower the budget cap to $150 million, that's US dollars, in 2021, but he believes it has to come down further. He wouldn't name teams, but BBC Sport was understanding that big team accepting of a lower cap was Mercedes, while Ferrari and Red Bull were resistant. Zach Brown believes that a lower cost cap with the same exemptions as now, such as driver salaries, would serve to make the field more competitive by reducing the financial advantage of the big teams and give the smaller teams a better chance of achieving good results. And there he goes on to explain his point a little further. And again, I want to stress that I'm not an economics person by any stretch of the mind or matter. Like a lot of talk about money and finances, that's not my forte. But there's at least efforts to try to bring some stability during this time, and that's something that can be appreciated. Whether or not teams agree on it, it's. I mean, it is. Justin, you mentioned it is a political debate, but if as long as the right moves are made and they keep their finances in order, teams are going to suffer. That's an inevitability. And car counts may drop as a result. But as long as they can get back on their feet and get some stability under them within the next few years, I'd say, then the sports, F1, IndyCar, NASCAR, all these other motorsports might be able to survive. But layoffs are happening. You mentioned last week how Front Row laid off a third of their employees. If I remember correctly, I think some other teams have laid off employees. I know McLaren furloughed a lot of their employees. Anything else to add to that point?
I will say a F1 and IndyCar are going to be in much better shape. When we come out of this, F1 and IndyCar have a system in place that allows new teams to come in. There's no extra cost for teams to come in. However, and this goes back to the charter debate, I was never a fan of the charter system, and I'm especially not at now. It was a faulty system made by Rob Kaufman to benefit off the dying corpse of MWR. Let's get that out of the way right now. It was made so MWR came away with as much money as possible coming after Spingate. I don't think that's I think it's a debatable dispute, but that's just kind of the reality is teams make more money coming out of the sport than they ever do on the racetrack. Who's going to want to buy in? Who's going to want to buy into NASCAR right now? Nobody's going to want to buy into a series that has associated itself with the charter system, first off, but also it just is not. There are many teams out there that are going to be selling. I think that's going to be the inevitability. Why should I pay extra money to basically run my team if I have to pay extra $500,000? I have a guaranteed spot on the roster. I mean, I have a guaranteed spot now on the grid. But why should I come in and invest into this sport when it has been, quite frankly, less profitable it was got less profitable over the Brian France era. We didn't have enough time to see what Jim could do. We haven't had enough time to transition out of what Brian France did into Jim France. I think a lot of companies also are looking at some of the more political side of things from the NASCAR perspective. And I think that's going to be a big concern. And is the association with the NASCAR stereotype? I think companies will also look at that going forward. So and I don't want to get political, but I think the reality is there's not going to be many companies coming in and little to no companies coming in over the next few years, but a lot of teams coming out.
Well, I mean, I don't know if there'd be like little to no companies coming in.
I said, and little to no let me clarify, little to no teams. Companies will come and go. Companies will come and go. That's a given. That's a cycle in NASCAR that's always been happening. We have old sponsors go like Nationwide, and we've had at Home Depot go, but we've also had new sponsors come in and to take their place. That's always going to be part of NASCAR. I think you're going to see less of those come in, but you're still going to have new sponsors come in. The biggest thing is teams coming in, and that's where problems will arise.
Al, you look like you want to say something about this.
I want to raise everyone's spirit, so I want to remind everybody of the money team. Now, here's the thing about the money team, Floyd Mayweather. You know who Floyd Mayweather, he's going to bring the worst out of? Conor McGregor, because Conor McGregor will want to beat Floyd Mayweather at something after getting knocked out in boxing. Now, I wouldn't be shocked if that man just decided to throw some millions at a team because Conor McGregor is a madman. All I'm saying is if it happens, I am a psychic, and you should know that.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I guess I'll try to bring some realistic stuff back here. Yes, Floyd Mayweather has registered a team, but if you look back at historical aspects of sports stars co-owning racing teams, it hasn't panned out very well.
Well,
their nicknames aren't money.
I will say, keep in mind, and the team that has kicked everybody's butts in the past 5 years
has been yes.
Has been.
He is the exception. The exception.
Now, here's the thing about Floyd is that any losses he gets on this team, all he has to do is fight once a year and he makes it back. And then some. I mean, Floyd has that foolproof, I'm just going to go fight a guy for like 12 rounds. I'm going to run around, not get hit him back, and make $100 million.
At the cost of his streak, though?
Okay, Floyd's not going to lose. I want to stop joking around. Floyd's not going to lose to anybody.
So you're saying the money team might win their – no. You're predicting the money team's going to win their first race?
I predict they're going to win all of their races personally because Floyd Mayweather has never lost.
This
just put him in the car.
This is –
No.
We have gone from memedom to
we're some much needed levity in the moment.
We're descending into chaos now, so we've gone well.
We're past the midnight hour, or strange things are afoot.
Yeah, we've passed midnight. It is now April 11th, but Central Time. So now let's go to just a previewing of the weekend. This will be the last thing we talk about. There's only going to be one race we mentioned earlier, but it will be the IndyCar iRacing Challenge Chevrolet 275 at the virtual Michigan International Speedway. Excuse me. It's 12:18 right now as at the time that we're recording this, so it's Saturday morning technically. I apologize if I sound tired, but I think we all are. Just looking at what the entry list is. Also, this will technically be the first IndyCar race of any kind at Michigan since 2007. And I remember that race because I remember watching it on when it was a rain delay on ESPN Classic. That race is best known for Dario Franchitti flying about 15 feet in the air and then coming right back down on his head on top of Scott Dixon. Don't worry, Dario survived. He actually went on to win the championship that year. But regardless, let's have a look at the entry list for this race, shall we? So let's have a look. So there are 31 cars listed on the entry list for the Chevy 275. Some names of note that I do want to put out there. Perhaps the biggest name that I want to go. Look at here. Look. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is registered for this race. Dale Jr. NASCAR Dale Jr. He's going to run this IndyCar event in the number 3 car.
I'm a little bit upset right now because he doesn't have his teammate Jimmy in there.
Well, that's right. Jimmy's not in there. Crap.
Jimmy's taking a week off.
I can't blame him.
He's earned it.
Let's see. Scott McLaughlin's also in this race. Let's see. Kyle Kaiser. Excuse me. I see Kyle Kaiser there as well. There is Connor Daly, Ed Carpenter, Felipe Nasser, James Davison. He is in both Davison and Dale Jr. are in on IndyCar provisionals. Let's look. Marco Andretti is going to make his first start for iRacing, the iRacing Challenge, driving his 98 car. Scott Speed drove it for the first 2 virtual races. And Robert Wickens is going to be in this race as well. So just looking at the entry list and what all is available, let's make some wild picks because why not? So
why not?
Yeah, Justin, let's start with you. Who is your pick to win an 85-lap race? It's going to be 85 laps around virtual Michigan. Who is going to win out of these 31 drivers?
First off, I wish Dale Jr. had the best of luck in winning in an upcoming lawsuit against Teresa Earnhardt for using the 3 car.
I guess we'll be in that lawsuit too then.
We have mentioned the Wicked Witch of the South. We're in trouble now.
Oh man.
But
as long as it's not the same font, I think maybe he'll be fine.
Let's be honest. She's ruined so many good things. Things about how the Intimidator legacy. Before we go too far with that, all kidding aside, I think this race is probably going to have a very similar result to the race we had the past 2 weeks, which means I think the driver who won last week is going back to back.
Scott McLaughlin?
McLaughlin for me.
All right, Hal, over to you. Who do you think is successful at Michigan?
That's a good pick. Such a good pick. I'm angry that I'm not going to pick it because I refuse to ever copy a pick. Let's see. I'm trying to go get a pattern here. 2 of them are from Indiana, which is really close to Michigan, I think. I don't know. States are close, maybe. Neither of them. Let's go with this is tough. You know what? Let's just go with Santino Ferrucci. I said this was a young man's simulation last week. I maintain it, even though it was proven kind of wrong. I don't know how young Scott McLaughlin is.
Scott McLaughlin, he is, I want to say he's in his late 20s.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can look it up later. I'm not going to bother with it right now, though.
I know Ferrucci is younger, though.
Ferrucci's pretty young, like early to mid-20s. Let's see. For my pick, who am I going to take out of this stable? Because I'll explain my thought process here. Because Michigan, I'm sorry, I really need some sleep after this show is over. But let's see. For Michigan Speedway, it used to be owned by Roger Penske. And during his days of owning the track, right when the IRL and CART split in 1995, 96 was the first season they ran separate from each other. And on the day of the Indy 500, CART ran the inaugural US 500, which was a debacle of epic proportions when Jimmy Vasser, the pole sitter, collided with Adrian Fernandez starting second, and like they had a 3 wide rows like they do at Indianapolis for the 500. The entire front row cleaned each other out, and then the rest of the cars just piled in. Oh, and one more thing. They hadn't even gotten to the green flag to start the event. They were in turns 3 and 4 when the crash happened, coming to the green flag. So, yeah, that was interesting. But, I mean, Penske used to own the facility. They used to have a 500-mile event from 96, at least, 96 to 2001. And actually, now that I think about it, they had the race longer than just 96. It was the Michigan 500. The last time the Michigan 500 was held was 2001, when Team Forsyth driver Patrick Carpentier won his first career kart event. The Michigan 500 had been held since 1981, before being transferred to the IRL in 2002 to be run as a 400-mile event. So the races always, like, it was always really close together, a lot of unpredictability, especially in its last year. I'm just trying to think. If I'm looking for unpredictability, let's, as I'm looking through the list of past winners here, who am I going to pick? Heck, let's just go crazy. Dale Jr. Because
why not? But just reminding everybody, if he wins today, because it is today technically now.
Yeah.
It's not a national holiday.
No, it's not.
It's not a national holiday. It's not a holiday if Dale Jr. wins.
I just got the
Do not be shooting out fireworks. Do not be breaking quarantine. It's not a holiday.
What do you mean it's not a holiday?
Wins
What do you mean
Michigan.
it's not a holiday if Dale Jr. wins?
All right.
You get what I'm referencing, Al.
Yes, I do. All right. Well, we've made our picks. We've gone on for about 2 hours now. So, any last thoughts about this? Any last thoughts? Period.
Now, this is the wildest thing I think I'll ever say in my life. Dana White is making a fight island. He bought an island. He's going to have fights on it. Can we make a race island? I don't want a real discussion on this. I'm just saying, let's make it happen, people.
Motorsports on an island. I mean, as long as we don't infect each other with COVID-19, we'll be fine. Justin?
I mean, we've had races in Japan, so that's an island.
And Australia, too.
So, but happy Easter to everybody out there. Again, stay safe. Follow CDC guidelines, and sooner we continue to lessen the curve or flatten the curve, the sooner we can get back to what we love to do.
Absolutely. So, yep, just wash those hands a lot. 20 seconds. That way we can flatten the curve. Also, practice social distancing. And if you're going out in public and you're sick, you're doing the wrong thing. You stay home unless you absolutely have to. Wear a mask, and just wear a mask as a precaution. I'll admit I've been doing the same thing working at Walmart for the past week. So wear the mask, wear gloves. Just take the precautions that you feel are necessary. Practice social distancing. Eventually, we will get through this. We are suffering, but we are suffering together. We're in this together. We'll get through it together. So take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Be kind to one another. And on that note, he's Hal Leestep. He is Justin Palmer. And I am Sterling Siemens. We will be back for Burnin Rubber Socially Distanced Edition sometime next week. Be sure to catch this episode on Anchor, Spotify, and YouTube. Again, let's work to flatten the curve, and we'll get back to racing sooner rather than later. Until next time, I'm Sterling Siemens, signing off.